Hi, Dee Dee. So we are now live streaming.
Okay, so we're set to go?
We are set to go. I need to tell you though, you will
Yes,
not be able to see the participants.
that's fine.
Okay, but just rest assured that everyone's here and
And we're good. All right, well, welcome to the 3 T's of Rigor in the Dual Credit Classroom. My name is Dee Dee Gerber. You will see on there, Licia, Dee Dee Gerber. Technically, my first name is Licia, but I go by Dee Dee. So if you ever look me up, it'll say Licia, but please, it's Dee Dee, just saying. So I am a dual credit instructor and an instructional coach from Mishawaka High School. I teach, like it says, English 111, English 215, Speech S121, and then a capstone class called the Gens 279. And I just really love dual credit stuff. But what I found when we started going into teaching a lot of dual credit things is that I wasn't getting students who are really ready to be in high school class or in college classes. They were still into high school because we do dual credit. They're not on a college campus. They're in our high school at Mishawaka High School. We just really got into early college program in about the last 6 or 7 years. Our first cohort graduated in 2019 and they earned, I think, 1,390 plus credits in that first year. Which is a huge savings in college tuition. We are an urban setting. We have about 1,500 students, mostly white, 72% white, 11% Black, then multiracial, but we are more than 50% free and reduced lunch. We now have more than 400 early college students in our high school setting. So we're really working toward building that college program. So in our first cohort year, our early college program earned 1,390 college credits. By 2 years later, just through Ivy Tech, not including IU, because our numbers, they were harder to do when we were looking at trying to get all of our information with all the pandemic. But we had 3,690 credits that they earned just 2 years later. And 9 of the students in our top 10 were part of our early college program, 6 of those with associate's degrees and 3 will earn Indiana College Core certificates. So our goal is to get students into some sort of career path or more college credits than what they maybe would have. We have a lot of students who are first-year college students. So I think that would be the same as some of you all who are working out in other states, not just like us in Indiana. So then we looked at, well, why did we really want to start getting this 3 T's of rigor put together, right? How do we really get our students into doing college level work in a high school class? And so we looked at understanding that relationship between motivation, their own identities, and academic outcomes. So this really has to do with intrinsic motivation and self-regulation, hopefully leading to positive outcomes such as achievement in school, better decision-making, goal-setting behaviors, right? So it all occurs when those certain psychological needs are met, that need for competence, the need for relatedness, the need for autonomy. And these are the kinds of things that we really try to teach them in our in the program that I'm going to show you today, which is our 3 T's. And so to really put that down into simpler terms, we want our students to succeed, just like all of you. We want them to competently complete work at a higher level, and we want them to take ownership of their own learning and education. So we start in this 3 T's with training, teaching, and tools. These are the 3 things that we really focus on. And that first thing, the foundation of our 3 T's is training. And we spend the entire first week training the students how to approach a dual credit classroom and what to expect from it. Now, some of you I know have an ACA class where that's the whole purpose of the class. We don't have that in ours, so we're essentially teaching them each and every class what it is that they need to do to be a college student. And so we re-go over that at the beginning of every class. What does it mean to be a college student in this type of class, and what do they need to do as students? And so the first part of that training obviously is going through the syllabus and emergency procedures. We go through how do you spend time like actually looking through the syllabus. What are the things that you should focus on or highlight? What are the things that are really important? So we actually spend that time, and sometimes it takes an hour and 10 minutes to go through that syllabus, but spending time on those details is really important. I give the students time to answer the questions. I don't gloss over any of those requirements because I may have to emphasize those later. Things like, you really can't turn in things late in a college course. That's a requirement. And so I make the time to go through the syllabus and the emergency procedures. And then the very next thing we do is we read the article, The Difference Between High School and College. It's actually chapter 2 from the book, College Thinking, How to Get the Best Out of College. It is an article that really highlights what is different about college than high school, and it focuses on several things. So one would be new types of intellectual work. So not just understanding, but to critically examine and evaluate things. So a lot of times in high schools, we're regurgitating dates, we're looking back at facts. But in college, you go beyond that to analyzing, to evaluating, and to look at things and see not that they're true, but if they're true. Which gets into the second thing that we really look at, which is the basis of beliefs and knowing why you believe something that you believe. Getting into that materials treated as beliefs before, we question things. We question things in history. We look at the biases of things. We look at whose perspective is this history being told from and why is that important? So in some ways, we think of college as a subversive institution, right? They make students question their way of life. They make students question what is true and why is it true? And then we look at why reason matters, right? Why does it matter that we question it? Good reasons increase the likelihood of truth. So we have them question why they believe what they believe. And this article goes into details, and we really look at the fact that in college, they'll get more into the Socratic questioning, using questions and answers to find justifiable true beliefs rather than just belief without justification, which changes throughout life, right? Your beliefs can change if you don't have the justification. We can kind of get blown around, but you're stronger in your belief if you can justify it, if you have reasons behind it. So we go through this article and we talk about all these points that it discusses. Then we take that and we do a Venn diagram of how high school is different than college as a whole, right? So we start with all those general things. And I have them tell me what they think is really important, things that they know. So they come up with things like they can choose their own schedule. There's an independence of their choices. But with independence comes more responsibility. They can choose if they want to go to class or not, right? But then they have to deal with the consequences of not being there. They can stay out as late as they want. Most colleges, not all colleges, but at a lot of colleges. But then are they tired the next day, right? Professors won't beg them for missing work. There's probably more reading and writing, and all of these things are things that they come up with. And then we get into the specifics of how that's going to affect this particular class that they're in. And we go through this at the beginning of each of the classes, no matter which one it is, because it becomes really important for how this particular class is different at a high school level than a college level. And the reason we emphasize that so much is because this is the first time they've taken it at a high school level also. So we look at, yes, this is the first time you've taken the high school. This is what you would expect from the high school part of it. But now we're taking it at the college level. And we want to move that up to, let's look at it from the college level too. So we look at those particular things like you're going to have more specialized vocabulary. Your reading levels are going to be higher and they could be longer readings. Your professor may not teach to your learning style. I may not. I'm going to work hard to teach you what those are, but I may not do exactly what you need. So how do you react to that? You're probably going to have more homework than in a regular high school class. There is no late work, right? Because this is high school, I have to, or because this is college, I have to follow the college's rules. And so we emphasize these things. When we're talking about our speech class, we talk about the fact that speeches have to be delivered on the day that they're due. They can't switch them off to another time and say, oh, I didn't feel good. Even though we're in a pandemic, because we're one-to-one, students can still do stuff at home. Now, we do make some exceptions. Obviously, if a student is really, really sick, I'm not going to make them deliver their speech. But as a general rule, if they just have a cold or something, the I feel sick doesn't work anymore. If they don't come to class, either virtually or in person on the day their speech is due, they're going to get a 0 on their speech. So there comes that responsibility. They can also track their own grade because we do total points because the college requires that. That makes a difference. And I also tell them they can ask to talk to me individually at any time, and that it's their responsibility to come. Yes, as a high school teacher, because I'm doing dual credit, I will come around and check with them more than maybe a normal college professor would, but it's also going to be up to them to come and really talk to me individually and start to understand when they need more help. So we talk about all these things. And then at the end of this Venn diagram, we also emphasize to students that they have to put in the right kind of effort in this college class. And so I go into an analogy about how if they're given a goal of running a mile and they have to start at point A and they have to end at a mile down the road, right? They could put in a lot of effort and run a mile, but if they're running in place, they're putting in all that effort, but they're not getting to where they need to be in the end. So I talked to them about how they have to put in the right effort, and knowing what the right steps are for whatever it is they're doing is vitally important. And if they're confused on anything, they should ask for help. And we go over here in the beginning, what are the different places that you can go for help? You can go and ask other students who are in the class. You can go to our Canvas page because it always has things, so their LMS system. They can go to me directly in office open hours. They can come and talk to me in class. They can shoot me an email if they're not sure on something, but that they always want to be asking questions when they don't understand something, because we want them to be putting in the right effort and not be frustrated after they've put in a mile's worth of work and they're not where they want to be. So we really emphasize putting in the right effort. So we go through the high school versus college, then we do the Venn diagram, and a group discussion usually takes about 20-25 minutes. And then I give them an article called College Reading Tips. And this is a handout that's derived from the book, A Guide to College Reading by Kathleen T. McWhorter. And we discuss some of the things that are in this. When I hand them out this article, the first thing I have them do is take a learning styles inventory. So I'm giving them 2 things at once. And the reason I do this is because in this article, it addresses why knowing your learning style, your specific learning style, is really important. So I have them take it and I record their answers, what they say they think they are. And then we go through addressing those learning styles. So the article addresses if you're an auditory learner, then you can improve reading comprehension by talking aloud. But we take that a step further and we say, okay, so what does that mean for you if you don't understand things well? Well, maybe you want to get into audiobooks. Maybe you want to record lectures when it's allowed by your professor. Creating rhymes and jingles to help you remember things will really help you, right? So hearing things, anything you can do auditorily, if you're an auditory learner, will really help you. Then we look at visual learners. You can improve your comprehension by visualizing things. And sometimes that's by visualizing in your head, but it's also by maybe creating a layout of different colors of things. I'm a big proponent of moving around in your space and using colored sticky notes to help you. So I tell students, if you're visual learners and you're creating a paper or project, go to the dollar store, grab about 4 or 5 different colored sticky notes and lay out things all over your wall, things that will help you, like all of this information is about this one topic, and this is a subtopic, and this is a subtopic, and you're going to put those all in different colors so you can manipulate them and move them around, that you can visually see them together. Creating diagrams, creating visual outlines, all of those things will help people who are visual learners. Staying where you're logically organized can help. And the other thing I emphasize to them, and this is hard for some people in this day and age, our students always want to be on technology. They always want to be on computers. But for people who are visual learners, handwriting things, not typing them, helps them remember, because there's a link between their brain and their fingers and what they're seeing, and they'll remember it better. So I tell them, feel free to take notes on the computer, but go back and print those out, handwrite things on the side, use colors, use things that will help you remember. For applied learners, think of real life situations that illustrate minor ideas in a passage. That's going to help them realize or increase their comprehension. For conceptual learners, I tell them asking and answering questions, that's going to increase your comprehension, right? So anything that's going to help them, knowing your learning style will help. Kinesthetic learners, they're all about, I use manipulatives with them, even at the college level, right? Anything that we can use larger spaces, that we can move around, that we can use charts and graphs, movements, visuals, and incorporating them into your wall. I tell my kinesthetic learners to really get in there and have a wall in their bedroom that's just open, that they can visually see stuff, but move stuff around in it. Use body movements. This is probably going to date me, but I remember an episode of Hannah Montana. Like I said, my niece was really into it. I don't know. And she was learning the bones of the body and couldn't remember them, but she created a song and she was doing all these movements that went along with it. And all of a sudden she could remember them. And I use that example with my students, even though they're past the Hannah Montana thing, but they remember it because I show them the clip of the song and what being a kinesthetic learner, when you're using those skills, really helps. So handling objects, walking around and reciting, using tools and machineries, learn by doing, right? That's the big thing. And then I keep a list of all of their specific learning styles. So as I'm working with them one-on-one and they're telling me they're not understanding, I'll ask them, what are they doing to help themselves? Because I also want to create an environment where they are using tools for their learning styles and helping them remember in the best way that they can. So then I'll go back and I'll reference that. Also in this first week, I like to send a parent letter home. And well, why learning styles matter. What I hear, I eventually forget, right? What I hear and see, I remember a little. What I hear, see, and ask questions about and discuss, I begin to understand. When I put all of those things together, I can teach another, I master it. So we do all of this with our students. So that's one reason why learning styles matter and why I want my students to know these things. So then once we get past the learning styles and I really talk to them about knowing what those are, and then I give them training resources of things that will really help them with their learning style, then I give them a parent letter to send home. And in this parent letter, I'm going to share our college expectations, which is going to talk about the fact that we're talking about no late work, they have to come to class, putting in effort is very important. I talk about the content levels of things that we're doing, that it's going to be higher vocabulary, longer readings, more mature content because it's higher level, that we may be watching and seeing things that you wouldn't normally watch in a college class and things you wouldn't normally think about. But I have to have parents acknowledge it, and I get a signature to acknowledge that they know these expectations, which becomes especially important when we get to a time when maybe a student hasn't turned something in on time and I can't accept it because this is a college class. And I get a parent letter saying, oh, but I'm sorry, he was busy, he had football practice, and so he turned this in 3 days late. And I can go back to that letter and say, yes, but remember, this is a college class. This is what the syllabus says. And I had you sign this at the beginning. I cannot give them credit for it. And you have to stick to that because it is a college class and we have to follow the college guidelines. The parent letter also that I share says that students have to maintain their Canvas. They have to make sure they're logging on. They have to be checking their emails. So all of those things that you don't always think about, but that we know that students have to do all the time, I make sure that they know in the parent letter. And I always end that parent letter with excitement about the course because I want them to know that I'm excited about them being there and I'm excited to teach the class and share the information with them and to learn and grow with them. Because really the classes are about them learning and growing, but also sharing enthusiasm and really developing themselves as college students. It's easier for me because I teach English and speech, but really that's our goal, is for them to become more independent learners. So some tips during this foundation, this whole first week and a half, don't assume that students already know the differences between high school and college, because even if you repeat this, even if you're doing it every time, you'll find there are still things that they don't understand about how things impact their class or your class for college. Don't assume they know their learning styles, because a lot of them don't. I usually have them take this learning styles inventory again at the end of the class. And sometimes it changes because they're like, oh, I really thought I was this, but I'm really not. I do inform parents of the difference the first week, so I can refer back to that, right? Because I have had to refer back to that a lot. So those are my tips for the foundational week. And I spend a lot of time on that in the 3 T's of rigor, just because it's vitally important and sets the foundation for everything else that we do in our classroom. So, and the whole rest of the semester. So that teaching, that's our building blocks of rigor. That's what we're going to get into. And that's where we really focus on the content of the class. And we'll reference back to that training as much as we need in our teaching. So the biggest part is scaffolding learners from the high school level to the college level on just about everything that we do. Because as a dual credit instructor, I have to remember again that this is the first time these students have taken this college class, but it's also the first time they've taken this high school class for it, right? So if this is junior English, if this is senior English, it's taking the place, it's doing both, but they haven't taken junior or senior English either. So they're kind of skipping it. So we start with that basics at the junior or senior high school level. So if we're looking at things like creating a citation, I'm going to start with the basics of what they would do in junior or senior high school, right? So junior high as in junior year, not middle school. So we talk about how to create a citation. So we'll go through and create one together, and we'll do the whole see one, share one, do it together, have them do it, right? So we scaffold up from there. They create one after we go through this process, but then we scaffold to where the college students would be going. So then we want to show the difference between an MLA citation and an APA citation and why they're different. And we show why the annotations are important and which type of classes are going to use which type and why. So we have our annotations, we have different styles of annotations. Then we build up from there and give examples of annotated bibliographies. And then we talk about how students create one. So they create one citation, and then we create multiple citations. But after they create the first one, I go around individually and I give them feedback on their annotated bibliography so that I can say, you did this really, really well, or maybe you need to improve on this, and this is what is really going to help you. So we look at their formatting. We look at the information that they put in that citation. So I always tell them to put 3 things in an annotation. One is kind of a short summary of what it is, how that is useful to you, and why that author or thing is a good citation. So that as they're going back, they know what to use in their sources. But I also tell them that they want to save this under their tools section. And that's actually the 3rd T that we'll get to at the end of this. Anything that they're creating a bibliography for, I have them save in a separate folder in their Google Doc under tools so that they can go back and access it later. And any resources I give them, I have them put there. So they trained on how to do this, on how we train on creating the tools section at the beginning. We start scaffolding, and all these resources they're going to put back in that tools section for later. So in the feedback that I give them, I always want to give them things that are actionable, like things that they did really well, that they should repeat, or things that are constructively critical so that they can fix it and it works better for them. So I would never just say, you need to do this better. I might say something like, what you're really missing here is your key of why this is important to your research. You're going to want to add that in, right? I took in a survey from my students, from my dual credit students, and I asked them about feedback and what they really appreciated about the classes that they learned the most from. And one of my students said, in the classrooms I learned the most in, I got examples and then time to learn the skill on my own, and then got critiqued from there. And I like to do this with all of the different assignments that I do, because I always want students to know what's the expectation, so they know what to shoot for. There's clarity, right? How do I do it? Clarity in the steps that it takes to get there, and then feedback so that they know they're doing it correctly. And that's how I know they're running the mile, because I'm checking in with them, that they're moving and their effort is done in the correct way. So then the next thing that we do in teaching, I teach them how to read based on the training article, right? So I assign required college reading, could be higher vocabulary, could be longer, but I teach them how to chunk the readings into smaller sections. In each one of these sections, I have them do something that's either like a 1-sentence summary or like a hashtag statement, right? So hashtag, summarize the article, whatever that passage was about. Gershwin's claim is that families that are economically based in lower income levels tend to rely more on family, right? That may be what that whole section was about. So the student has it in 1 sentence and they don't have to go back and reread an entire article to re-get the meaning. They can look up unknown vocabulary, and they should write down what that is because they may need to reference it later. And I always assign directed reading questions to help students understand the purpose of the text. I never want a student to just read it and have no idea what that's for. So if we want them to be rigorously reading and reading with purpose, then we need to tell them what their purpose is. Again, that goes back to the clarity in teaching. I want to make every assignment count, right? So another one of my students said, I learn the most in classes that actively review material and relate new lessons back to previous ones. So in all of the dual credit classes, and very frequently in almost every college class that we have, our concepts build on each other, right? We start with something smaller and we keep going up, we scaffold up. I do that with all of my classes here too, right? Every concept builds upon the one that we did before. So we sometimes do summary, then summary and critique, then critical analysis, then in-depth analysis of a reading, looking through a lens, right? All of these things that build upon each other. So tips for the teaching part, the building blocks, right? Always have your material ready before you begin the semester. You can always add to it during the semester, but you want to be prepared and know exactly what it is you're doing so that the students will always know what they do, what you're doing and what they're supposed to do. And it's critically important, and why I love conferences like this is because I think you should always network with teachers who also teach the same kind of classes that you do. Get those tips, collaborate on assignments. You may need to contact other schools to do this, but I believe it's really worth it. Do not assume students know how to get what you are asking them to do, right? They may not. You may think, oh, they should have learned this in the last 3 classes. Maybe they were sick when they were supposed to have learned it. Maybe they just weren't paying attention. Maybe that teacher didn't teach it in a way that they understood it, right? So don't assume they know how to do what you're asking of them. Do complete those individual conferences with them, because that allows them to ask questions in a much more non-threatening way without other people around. It allows you to ask questions of them to try to dig for deeper meaning to see if they really understand, if they can explain things. And sometimes that really, really helps. Next, clarify your directions. If students ask you questions, don't just redirect them to the directions that you had before. Walk them through the directions and find out where their questions are. Sometimes you won't even know what's bothering them unless you've walked back through them with them. So this leads them to more independence because they can start to figure out where it is that they had their problem.
Nope.
They know specifically what to ask, and they can go back and do that. Do not water down or make your lessons less rigorous, right? Just because students are in high school, because they're taking it.
I'm in a conference. I can't wait. Can you not go home?
Sorry, I just went too far and now my stuff goes. Hold on. So don't water down your lessons. Also circle back to that training whenever you realize
I can't.
struggling with a new concept or demand, right? Make sure that if they're having issues, you go back and you really help them. That training, that teaching them where to go, going back to that, okay, if you're not understanding this, if you're not figuring out how to organize it, let's look at your learning style. Let's walk through some of those things that really help you learn and walk them through it. Help them remember the things that they really need to do in order to do what it is they need to do, right? Also, take the time to work on metacognition. I cannot focus on this enough with my kids. At the beginning, when you use the word metacognition, they're going to be like, what is that? I don't know what that is. And I always tell them that being aware of what your understanding is, knowing what your own thought processes are, really help you understand when you know, right? And when you don't know, and when you need to seek out help. Because we want to build learners, not just build subject knowledge. So I ask students to question, go through the directions, write questions down on them, figure out if there's something you don't know, talk over the assignment with a partner, find out their understanding of it and then your own. If you guys have different understandings, what's the difference? And is that a difference in you're just allowed to do the assignment differently? Or is there something critical that one of you is going to do wrong if you don't understand it correctly? So working on that metacognition, understanding your own thought processes and knowing when you understand something and when you don't becomes important. And I keep going back to that and asking them, do you understand? Do you not understand? And having them re-explain things to me. I like engagement in my activities too. So sometimes I'll explain something one way and see if a student can explain it another way. I always give them a heads up and say, hey, I'm going to come back to you on this, see if you can tell me what it is, so they know to expect that. And then one of the last tips is set firm deadlines and help students achieve them. Don't give in to deadlines. Don't say, oh yeah, you can always have more time. That's not realistic for college. We want to hold them to the deadlines, but we want to help them achieve them, especially when we have our IEP students or students who have any kind of plan set out by the state because they have a learning disability or something. We want to work with them ahead of time. So I'll sit down and conference with them even at the first couple of weeks of the semester and say what their resources are that are available to them. I'll remind them ahead of time of deadlines. I'll set individual conference times with them through our advisory program if they want them. But I reinforce that those deadlines are still there and they have to meet them, but I'm more than willing to work with them ahead of time to help them meet the deadlines. Which leads us into our tools, which is the capstone of Rigor, right? So we spend the first amount of time training them how to do a college class. We go through the rigor of teaching them and scaffolding everything up, learning how to do the reading, learning how to use vocabulary, learning how to think at a different level and to really discuss things. And then we get into how do we categorize all this in a way that's meaningful and the way that'll help them be organized and keep their rigor up. So as we progress through the semester, I give students tools that they can use to complete their work. So one of the first things that I have them do, because organization I think is totally the key, is have them keep a list of helpful websites with annotations of what they have found on them. And I teach my students how I want them to annotate for my specific class, right? You'll know what type of annotations to use. I'm going to annotate differently if I'm having them do websites for like a reading class or Purdue OWL for writing, for their style guides. But those annotations are going to look different if I'm in a math class and I'm learning formulas or something like that. So I have them keep the websites, but then I have them annotate, why is that website important? And I'll even have them keep different documents. And I tell them within your tools section of Google Drive, I want you to keep something for math. I want you to keep a file for science. And then within those, differentiate it between your classes, right? So if you have something for, you're in trig and you're going into calculus and then beyond, keep something that's specific for formulas. And each time you reuse that type of formula, put the new way that you're going to use it so that you can go back and look at that later, because it becomes extremely helpful for applying that later. Even though I teach English classes, I still talk to my kids about their math and science, about how they're having to go back 3 years in a class and they don't have notes for that anymore. And I tell them, if you can stay organized and keep lists of these things, it really will help you when you go to study later. So have them keep those lists of new vocabularies and formulas. And as they're learning the new vocabulary and writing them and using them, they'll remember them much more. And even though they're on the list, they may not need to keep referring to the list as much. I have them keep samples and examples or useful artifacts in their Google Drive, both their personal and their school accounts, because I found that a lot of times once they leave the high school, because our classes are all in the high school setting, their regular high school account gets deleted after they graduate. So I tell them, yeah, put it here for now because you're in our class at the school, keep it in your school account, right? But also keep it in your personal account so that if you transfer schools from one college to another, you still have all that information and it can follow you and you can keep it to reference back. And keep referencing back to those tools. As students, you'll have questions, right? You're going to need the information in the future on how to do citations, on how to use specific formulas, on how to do projects, how to do research that you're doing specific to your field. All of those notes will help you. And even in research that you've done in the past that you can apply to later, you'll have it at your fingertips if you keep that tools section. And I just want to keep reinforcing to them that knowing their learning styles and putting the practices of their learning styles help them to learn. And then teaching with those in mind and teaching them that not all professors will be keeping those in mind, right? That sometimes they'll walk into a class and it'll be all lecture and all they'll do is sit and take notes, right? what do they do when that happens? Having the tools to say, this is my learning style, this is how I can take that lecture and translate it in a way that I understand, that'll help me. Or if I'm not understanding what the professor is saying, how do I then go get information that helps me? And finding those tools and reinforcing it, knowing through metacognition that they're not getting the information that they need, how do they go find the tools to learn the information and then log that is super important. And I use the example of my sister. My sister was a psychology major in college, and she took a class with a professor. She got an A in the class, but she said, I didn't learn anything that I was supposed to learn, and I need it for my job. Because she's a social worker, she works in the medical field, and she knew that she was going to need a lot more information. So she retook that class. She audited it because she didn't have to take it again. She already had an A, but she audited it from another professor. And she said it was the best thing that I did because I actually got the information I need. I don't want students to have to do that, but I do want them to know that they're not getting the information that they need or they're not understanding it well enough. So using these tools, learning when they understand something and when they don't, or when they're getting the information that they need, or when they don't understand becomes important. And by being able to review, by scaffolding things up, by learning their tools section, hopefully I'm giving them the tools that they need in order to really transition from high school to college and do work at a college level. And that is essentially the basics of the 3 T's of rigor. I do have copies of all of the articles that I read. If anybody wants any of them, you can contact me. I am going to leave about the last 10 minutes here open for questions. If anybody has any, you can feel free to contact me. You can ask questions. I do know there's a little gap in the questioning time, but the moderator is going to share any questions with me. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those in chat now.
Dee Dee, I am not seeing any questions in the chat at this time.
Okay. Well, I will stay on here. So that is essentially the 3 T's of rigor. But if anybody wants more information, I'll stay on here during the session. If you don't have questions and you want to leave, I guess that's what you can do. But I just wanted to give a little time here at the end if anybody did have questions.
So we do have a question that says, have you had to spend a significant time teaching how to use your LMS?
I have not, but our entire school uses our LMS. So by the time they get to me, they've been using it for several years. I do have to with my freshmen, and that when I have freshmen come in, that's not usually my dual credit classes, but I do with them. And so I take the time, and if we have any kids that transfer in and aren't used to using it, I'll sit down specifically and work with them one-on-one. So I do go through my LMS with my students, even at the beginning of class, even in this class, and say, this is where you'll find the resources for this class. We use Canvas and I do everything out of modules. So I'll show them specifically where to go for our class activities every day. I know, especially in a pandemic, that there are going to be times that people are gone, maybe even for like 2 weeks at a time, right? So I put everything in Canvas. There are times that I have videos in there and recordings so people can go back and see things. I want my students to have the best experience in my class that I can give them and to know where to go for resources. So we utilize that LMS a lot. All of my quizzes are done through Canvas. All of our lessons and assignments are done through Canvas. I don't collect anything on paper anymore. I do allow students who really need it to take notes and stuff on paper. And if it's something that we're submitting, like if they're doing class discussions, they can take a picture of it and submit it that way. And I even show them how to do that so that they know they're giving it to me in the right format. But yeah, I do spend time making sure they know exactly where to find information on our source and how to turn things in.
Dee Dee, we've got some comments that this is an excellent session and very informative. And then a comment from the person who asked the question about have you had to spend significant amount of time teaching them how to use your LMS. Also said that I find that it is a challenge for my high school students who have gotten used to using Google Docs. So switching to our Moodle tends to take quite a bit of time.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the advantages that we have in Canvas, is that they can still use Google Docs in Canvas. So they just attach whatever it is from their Google Drive. I haven't used Moodle as much, so I don't really know how that transition works, but we do a lot of collaboration on Google Docs, and the fact that it integrates well with Canvas kind of works with us. That is one thing else that I do in Rigor, is we do a lot of class discussions. So when I give them reading, I make sure that we discuss things when they have their focus questions. They talk about it as a group and then as individuals, and I have them write both what their group said and then whether they agree or disagree with what their group said. So they have to think beyond the group think, so that their directed questions, they're thinking on their own, but then they're also getting to discuss it for deeper meaning. I don't think I had that in here, but I do that. That's part of the teaching.
So I'm not seeing any other comments right now. I will add that I just really appreciated your speaking to addressing and teaching your students metacognition, because I think that's such an important piece for them to understand for their success.
Right. It's such a strong thing. And students have no idea, even coming in at a high school senior level. Like
Yes.
I say the word and it's like I dropped something on the floor and they're like, I don't know what that is.
Yes, I know. And it's so important, and it can make such a tremendous difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very informative session. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there are no more comments or questions, thank you all for coming today. Like I said, if you want any resources or you have any questions for me, you can also feel free to email me. My email is gerberl@mishawaka.k12.in.us on the screen. And I did put the resources, or some resources, up on the Dual Enroll 21 site. So have a great day, y'all.
Bye, Dee Dee. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.